What is going on, everyone? It has been quite the minute, but I am back, and today I think I have a very important video that I would like to just kind of talk about. So as you have read the title, today I want to talk about the dangers of social media, and specifically as an artist, more so as a beginner artist, because obviously if you're more of an experienced artist, you probably already have experience with social media, but this is just kind of my point of view as a beginner. I'd say is beginner, maybe intermediate, somewhere around there. So my first danger of social media is that it isn't reality, and it's a little vague. So what I mean by that exactly is, the thing about social media is most of the time you're gonna be following like really big accounts because they have bigger reach, obviously, than smaller accounts. And what can happen over time is you kind of tune your feed into something that isn't really a good representation of what most artists are going through, or what stages they're at, because the reality is that there's a lot less professional artists than there are like beginner or newbie kind of artists. And so I guess in of itself isn't a bad thing, but it can kind of lead into what I like to call tunnel visioning. And what I mean by that is, since your feed is tuned to a certain way that isn't really representative of the reality of most artists, it can kind of like almost subconsciously give you the wrong idea of what it's like to be an artist online. Although like it necessarily isn't a bad thing that like most social media, like if you're following a bunch of big artists, like that isn't really the reality of most artists, especially artists who want to go professional. I still think it's something to keep in mind, is that you may become so accustomed to following big artists that it seems like almost all these artists are successful and you're not, or I don't know, just kind of give off some kind of feeling because you're following all of these other artists who are most likely at a higher skill level than you, and it can just kind of lead into this tunnel visioning. I don't necessarily have a specific example. It's kind of also unique to every like individual, because not every person's feed is the same, or who they're following is the same. But even though it's not necessarily a negative, I do think it's important to understand that social media is not really real. Like it is, but it's not really. And I'm kind of gonna further elaborate on that point later on in the video. So yeah, that's my first point. The first point is that social media is not the reality of most artists. So my second point, and this is definitely a big one, is that numbers can mess with you. Now, I'm sure if you guys have posted your art on like Twitter or maybe even like Instagram, and you're super proud of it, you worked really hard on it, only for it to get like 5 likes and like 2 retweets, and it can kind of sting sometimes, and it's hard not to feel negative when you work so hard on something and it doesn't really pop off as much as you wanted it to. And obviously, the amount of likes and like retweets you get on an art piece doesn't determine whether it's good or not. But it's hard to kind of think that in the moment and like you know, really enforce that in the moment when, and this is kind of going back to my first point, when you see all these other artists who are either above your skill level or below your skill level, and it looks like they're having a lot more success because their art is getting promoted and yours isn't. And that's kind of what I mean with not only that, you know, social media isn't really reality. It can kind of just spiral into a negative mind storm, I suppose. And it's something to be aware of. You know, likes and all of that don't really mean much. I mean, they're not meaningless, but they aren't representative of whether your art is good or not. And at the end of the day, all art is subjective. There is objective elements to art and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you know, you could not like an art piece that somebody else loves. You know, it's all subjective. So that's my second point. That is a very big one. It's happened to me a lot. It's caused me a lot of turmoil that really, honestly, shouldn't be there, and it just kind of makes the whole experience of posting art online kind of miserable sometimes. And it's something that you kind of have to just be aware of. You know, just because your art doesn't get X amount of likes or doesn't perform however well you expect it to, it doesn't mean your artwork is bad or you know, you're just like not as good as you are or whatever, or you failed or something. It's just a, you know, it's just a game of luck, you know, and if you have like connections and stuff like that. So yeah, and like what's popular and stuff like that. So my next point is, yeah, all these points kind of bounce off one another. So my next point is, social media can persuade you to draw a certain way. And this is a big one because you may not want to draw a particular way or a particular character, but let's say that character is very popular right now, right? You might be like, oh snap, you know, this character's popping off. I might need to, you know, I should draw them so maybe I can get put in the algorithm or, you know, pop off with this drawing. And this is a big issue because you may not want to draw that character or whatever it is that's popping off, but you do it anyways out of the sake of, you know, gaining a bigger following and stuff like that. And this is where not, you know, first of all, you're drawing something that you don't want to draw because you think it might pop off, and then let's say it doesn't perform well, right? On top of that, well, now you just drew something that you didn't want to draw and it also didn't pop off, which is probably going to make you feel a little upset, and then it kind of just spirals, you know, from there. And it sucks that like that's the way it is, but that, you know, that is the way it is, and that's just kind of another thing, you know, to where it's good to be aware of what social media actually is and the traps you can kind of fall into with it if you kind of go in unprepared. So yeah, social media can very much persuade you to draw in a way that you may or may not want to, and then on top of that, you know, the numbers can mess with you if you're not prepared and you let them, and it can kind of just spiral downhill. So my next point is there's just a lot of hate and like drama on social media that really nobody needs, or honestly shouldn't even be on social media in the first place. So it can just be a very negative space on top of everything I just mentioned. Now you got, you know, there's always like artists, you know, exposing other artists for using AI as an example, or, you know, this person drew this character this way and people don't like it, or that's wrong. And there's just a lot of, frankly, bullcrap that you can come across that you don't want and you for sure don't need on social media. So you gotta be careful about that stuff, because you can easily be sucked into the negativity void that social media unfortunately kind of thrives off of. It's just a fact that drama and stuff like that kind of just pops off. It's what gets views and stuff like that, even though it's negative. And it can just be a really unhealthy thing to constantly engage with. So that is a very big one. I would say probably one of the most important ones. There's just a lot of just negativity and drama and harassment, bullying, and just a lot of stuff you do not want. So if you do plan on posting your art online, be prepared, look out for that kind of stuff, and recognize that you gotta like protect yourself from getting involved and being affected by stuff like that. For my last point, this last point kind of builds off my first point. A lot of art on social media is manufactured. Now, what do I mean by manufactured? Well, I mean that it's drawn a certain way to hopefully maximize the amount of engagement that it gets, or capitalize off of a trend, kind of like what I was talking about before, where it can persuade you to draw a certain way. A lot of art, especially I've noticed this on like Instagram. I don't really use Instagram that much because I don't like it, but a lot of art on Instagram is literally people just like one for one copying a reference and then just editing the video in a certain way, in a way that appeals to the masses. And before I go any further, there's nothing wrong with copying a reference. In fact, you need to do that to learn. But when you copy a reference one for one and you post it or frame it in a way that appears like it's your own drawing, probably shouldn't do that. A little sketchy in my opinion. But yeah, a lot of art is just, unfortunately, it's produced in a very particular way. And I don't have really an example, which kind of seems dumb. Like, really, you're talking about this, you don't have an example? You kind of just have to use like it mostly, and this is mostly for Instagram, because that's where I've noticed it the most. I don't use TikTok, by the way, so it could be kind of similar there. But like, a lot of the reels are kind of structured in a very particular kind of way, and that's because obviously people want to get engagement, and people want you to sit through their entire reel and stuff like that. That's kind of what I mean when it's manufactured. And the thing about it is, it's not really, a lot of it is not really genuine, if that makes sense. And maybe that might not bother you or not, but I do think it's something to be aware of, because once again, social media isn't the reality of most artists. It's just not. It's this manufactured storm of art that is drawn a particular kind of way to hopefully appeal to the most people as possible. And I'm not saying everybody does it like that, or everyone's just out to just for the numbers and stuff like that, because that isn't true. But the majority are, and that's just kind of what it is, especially if you're taking it seriously, because who doesn't want to try and get the biggest audience that they can, or you know, increase their watch time or like count or whatever, as much as they can. So yeah, with that, those are my kind of 5 points that I wanted to talk about. Just kind of what I've experienced being, I would consider myself like a beginner artist, but I've kind of been around for a bit. So just kind of what I have experienced being on social media for as long as I have. Although, to be honest, I do not use TikTok, and I barely use Instagram because I hate them. Because I don't like them. But yeah, I think if you are kind of a serious artist, or you plan on being a serious artist, you should really take all these points into account. And if you plan on, you know, posting on social media, you know, just be aware of kind of what you're getting yourself into, because when I started, I definitely was not aware, and especially like the drama and the hate and the negativity, you know, that stuff can just come out of nowhere and just kind of like ruin your day. And that's the last thing you want. Yeah, kind of just, you know, just wanted to talk about the dangers of social media, particularly as an artist. And hopefully you guys got something out of this video. I'm gonna be trying to get back into posting regularly, and yeah, I'm just getting back into it. Had to take a little bit of a break there, but we are back. So yeah, with that, I am gonna head out. If you guys enjoyed, you know, be sure to leave a like and comment and whatnot, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.